I am Dr. Sonyai Kumar. Welcome to my channel, The Risk Management Research. The channel is dedicated to developing risk management videos for users' benefit. This video is based on the article, How Regulators See Risk Culture, published in Premier, Intelligent Risk, in May 2024. The purpose of converting an article into a video is to make it easy for users to read the content. The summary of the article is, since regulators realize that bank failures are not all due to credit and market risks or their interactions with other risks, they have started to focus on the root internal cause, risk culture. This article delves into how regulators perform when defining and addressing risk culture and how they encourage better behavior from banks. The Institute of Risk Management defines risk culture as values, beliefs, knowledge, attitudes, and understanding about risk shared by a group of people with a common purpose. Over time, risk culture has become essential to developing enterprise risk management, ERM. Risk culture lubricates the engine of ERM through the three lines of defense model, enabling it to run smoothly. Therefore, risk culture has attained priority among global financial regulators. In a speech delivered by the Vice Chairman of the European Central Bank, ECB, in September 2023, he said that culture is a collective mindset and the shared set of values that shape the everyday behavior of a bank's employees. Culture may be invisible on one hand, but what is tangible are behaviors. The culture drives either prudent risk management behaviors or derails risk management practices. The transition from siloed risk management to ERM over the last 2 decades has not significantly improved the failure rate of financial institutions, so regulators have now focused on enhancing the risk culture that drives ERM. The Prudential Regulation Authority, PRA, for example, penalized Credit Suisse International and Credit Suisse Securities Europe Limited £87 million for substantial failures in risk management and governance between the 1st of January 2020 and the 31st of March 2021, related to the firm's exposures to Archegos Capital Management. This article investigates key initiatives taken by national regulators such as the ECB, Financial Conduct Authority, FCA, and De Nederlandsche Bank. The purpose is to identify the key initiatives and learn where risk culture is still developing. The Institute of Risk Management, IRM, has created 4 buckets of risk culture: tone from the top, governance, decision-making, and competency. These 4 elements are further broken down into 2 elements each, as shown in Table 1. Table 2 summarizes the risk culture elements recommended by global regulators. Most of the IRM risk culture elements coincide with global regulators' recommendations. The ECB monitors behavior and culture as part of banks' internal governance. They look at policies and risk frameworks and how people behave within the governance setup. One key element of culture assessment followed by the ECB is whether there are constructive challenges in the management meetings. The supervisor's representative attends the board or committee meetings as a silent observer to identify whether there is a culture of constructive challenge. The idea is to observe whether the bank has an embedded risk culture, mindset, that drives positive behavior, or whether the dominant CEO or chair of the board drives business decisions. The regulator monitors financial and non-financial risks and signals a weak risk culture. The purpose is to identify the prevailing risk culture and give feedback to improve ERM implementation. The FCA first published its culture and governance guidelines in 2015. They define culture as an organization's typical behaviors and mindsets. The FCA does not attempt to measure mindsets and behaviors directly. Instead, firms can identify and manage different drivers of behavior. The key 4 drivers are 1. Purpose 2, Leadership 3. Approach to rewarding and managing people. 4. Governance through their supervision of firms. They determine how effective each of these drivers of behavior is in reducing the potential harm arising from a firm's business model. FCA looks at principles of effective remuneration practices across all firms, including how a firm's reward strategy is linked with business strategy and purpose, evaluations of good behavior and conduct, the association between behaviors and reward, and how individuals are held accountable for conduct and competence. Firms should be able to demonstrate how their remuneration practices lead to appropriate outcomes and how their governance processes help detect, manage, and mitigate the risk of harm that inappropriate incentives may cause. In 2016, Andrew Bailey, then Chief Executive of the Prudential Regulation Authority, said they could not explain a regulatory rule that develops culture. Instead, it is the product of many things that regulators can influence. They focus on the firm's governance, which includes appropriate challenges from all levels of the organization. They promote the acceptance of good and bad news. They want remuneration to be structured so that individuals have skin in the game. Past remuneration is retained or deferred, and senior people are at risk should problems emerge. They want to ensure that risk management and internal audit are effective and linked with incentives. The FCA has minimum standards of behavior in the form of 5 conduct rules, which sit at the heart of the senior managers and certification regime, known as the accountability regime. The purpose of the senior managers and certification regime, SM and CR, is to reduce damage to consumers and strengthen market honesty by making individuals more accountable for their conduct and competence. APRA remarks that good times often mask poor practices, and poor risk culture can go unnoticed for some time. Still, when adverse market events occur, they have a significant capability to cripple the entire financial system. In the past, regulators have worked to strengthen the balance sheet of the financial system to improve resilience, but this did not enhance the risk cultures of failing institutions. APRA realized this and focused on improving the risk culture of financial institutions under its jurisdiction. They identified some undesirable global behaviors that have caused crises in different parts of the world, such as 1. Short-term financial interest, including personal conflicting interest. 2. Treating risk management practices as an inconvenience. 3. Poor management accountability. 4. Failing to balance risk-reward behavior. 5. Not taking timely actions. 6. Concealing problems rather than resolving. De Nederlandsche Bank DNB supervision considers behavioral and cultural aspects based on 3 premises. 1. Increasing rules and regulations is not enough. Increasing rules and regulations are not enough to prevent a financial crisis. Though they create a perception of control, this approach has limits. Rules regarding capital and liquidity do not prevent excessive risk-taking that leads to financial crises. In the past, regulations have not prevented adverse human behavior and are not substitutes for character. 2. Connection with public trust and financial stability. A strong relationship between an organization's behavior and culture and public trust in the financial system is a significant sign of financial stability. DNB believes trust is the foundation of a sound financial system and a vital driver of a stable economy. 3. Behavior and culture are part of sound business operation. Financial institutions need to develop mission statements related to developing and monitoring effective behavior and culture. These 3 premises form the building blocks for developing behavior and culture within financial institutions under the DNB's jurisdiction. The DNB model of behavior and culture is built on 3 layers, like an iceberg, with behavior seen at the top. 1. Behavior seen and perceived by others. 2. Group dynamics, interactions between groups of people. 3. Mindset, values and beliefs, mental models. Under DNB's supervision, they identify group dynamics, behavior patterns and mindsets in decision-making, leadership and communication. The regulator pays special attention to behaviors related to decision-making, leadership and communication because these behaviors are essential and work together and depend on each other to achieve a common goal. In the group dynamic, define the interactions between different positions and patterns within or between a group, which affect overall effectiveness. The deepest level of organizational culture is mindset, the deeply held values and beliefs guiding group dynamics and individual behavior. DNB tries to identify herd mentality because it deprives supervised banks of a culture of constructive challenge. An organization captured by herd mentality may be driven by strong, influential personalities that will not bring diverse viewpoints. This may lead to a crisis when market forces are against it or when stress conditions arise. Canada's OSFI developed guidelines on risk culture and behavior in February 2023 because culture can affect decision-making, prudent risk-taking, and effective risk management, which can impact the financial institutions under its jurisdiction. They set the risk culture guidelines based on assessing culture and behavior for effective risk management. The guidelines have created 3 expected outcomes for the financial institutions regarding culture and behavior. 1. Culture and behavior are designed and governed through clear accountabilities and oversight. 2. Desired culture and expected behaviors are proactively promoted and reinforced. 3. Risks emerging from behavioral patterns are identified and proactively managed. The New York Fed presented the concept of cultural capital, an intangible asset that impacts the organization's operation. This is like physical capital, such as equipment, buildings, and property, or human capital, such as workers' knowledge and skills. Another typical example is reputational capital, such as franchise value or brand recognition. The Fed believes that misconduct risk is low in an organization with high cultural capital. Such organizations follow the rules and regulations, including formal incentives, in line with their core values. Employees feel empowered to raise concerns and believe their efforts will bring positive outcomes from management. On the other hand, in an organization with a low level of cultural capital, employees are afraid to speak freely when they have concerns, and senior management only enforces proper conduct once authorities point it out. Rules are followed in the letter, but not in spirit. This section discusses the comparison of IRM's risk culture elements against global regulators. It further provides examples of risk culture gaps and enforcement actions for each to establish the link to ERM. 1. Tone from the top. This should clarify the leader's direction and reinforce value add through risk management. It is also about leading by example. All 6 regulators mentioned above made tone from the top one of their key elements of risk culture. When leadership communicates, it discusses how the organization deals with bad news. This is the second element of IRM's tone from the top bucket. It sets the tone of communication without fear. Leadership is one of the key elements considered by the FCA. PwC conducted a survey in which nearly 90% of respondents agreed that tone from the top is critical in effectively mitigating risks to their organization related to fraud, corruption, and ethical behavior. Governance. One of the key elements of accountability is managing risk. Most of the global regulators also reinforce this aspect. Accountabilities fix the responsibilities. Andrew Bailey, in the speech mentioned above, said that accountabilities and responsibilities cannot be delegated. Governance is one of the key pillars of FCA's risk culture. Another element of governance that IRM talks about is transparency and timelines of risk information. Transparency and timelines boil down to clear communication. Again, one of the elements of the global regulator risk culture feature. Example: lack of transparency led to financial losses for General Electric, GE, in 2017 to 18. GE's conduct was contrary to disclosure policies and laws, accounting controls, and those provided by securities law. Continued failures to disclose information about GE's energy and insurance financial status, including failure to disclose the nature of the $2.50 billion in cash from the energy business, was testimony to a lack of transparency in disclosure, indicating a breach of one of the elements of risk culture. Another example: the collapse of Bear Stearns revealed shortcomings in risk management policies and procedures. The 2010 Dodd-Frank Act was passed to increase transparency and accountability. It also created new oversight bodies, such as the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, to protect consumers from abusive lending practices. Competency. The first element is status, resource, and empowerment of the risk function. This important element respects the Chief Risk Officer's (CRO) ability to operate confidently and without fear. The second element is embedding risk management skills across the organization. All the regulators have encouraged the development of risk management skills. Example: Christina Bailey in 2022 studied the relationship between CRO expertise, ERM quality, and firm performance. This study examined individual expertise areas as well as broad-based expertise measures. The result showed that supervisory and industry expertise, an MBA degree, and internal promotion of CRO are related to better ERM quality. Risk and actuarial expertise are linked to higher return on assets. In contrast, financial knowledge, supervisory know-how, and an MBA degree are related to greater levels of Tobin's Q. Broad-based CRO knowledge is also linked with ERM quality and firm value. Further results show that skill in the CRO role was particularly relevant during the financial crisis. Decision-making. IRM recommends making a well-informed risk decision as the first element under this bucket. A well-informed risk decision considers associated risks that will reduce likely losses. Appropriate risk-taking is rewarded, and performance management is linked to risk-taking. Risk-taking is the second element under the decision-making bucket. The regulators cover both elements separately under decision-making or incentives. Example inadequate decision-making is central to most crises, especially when the decisions are not risk-based. In the case of Silicon Valley Bank, leadership needed to decide to manage the basic interest rate and liquidity risk, along with the appointment of a new CRO. Over time, but especially during the post-2008 economic crisis, there have been changes in regulation to control risks in the financial sector which never targeted the root of some issues. Now, globally, key regulators are focusing on developing the risk culture that drives enterprise risk management and can impact all other risk types. Risk culture is hard to define, hence the range of approaches to address it. Ultimately, the best risk culture might be one that learns through stress. The onus of risk culture development should shift from regulators to boards, where remuneration linkage could speed up this transfer. All regulators have embedded the incentive as one of the key elements of developing a risk culture. However, its administration is the key to its success. For proper development of risk culture, all elements should be carefully crafted, fitted to the jurisdiction, and reviewed often,